with an outlet called The Intercept. And it was an interview that flipped the story on its head once again. It was like J 8.0 version. And then Kevin Urich, the lead prosecutor, gave an interview to the same outlet. And there was a lot of contention about it because both of them, their interviews contradicted one another. And it raised a lot more questions about the case, really, especially after Jay's interview. Then what happened was, those on Adnan's kind of defense team, we knew about this for a while, but Asia McClain came back into the picture. And what happened was Asia had been contacted by Sarah when she was investigating the story, and Asia had told her, well, this is about a year ago, 6 months before the podcast started, and Asia had told her, well, when Adnan's private investigator came to me to do the post-conviction, I was scared. I really didn't want to testify. I didn't know what was going on. I thought he had gotten, a fair trial and was duly convicted based on some strong evidence. And that was it. But she stood by her story, and that's what we heard in the first episode of Syria. Now, what Asia didn't know is what Kevin Urich, the prosecutor, actually testified to in the post-conviction hearing. So she listened to the podcast. And as Asia listened to the podcast, about halfway through, she realized what had actually happened. She realized that Urich had lied to her, because he told her that there was a lot of evidence against Adnan. She realized how important her testimony was. And she also told Sarah, by the way, he lied. I never told him that I made those documents under duress. So Sarah had this information, and she came to our lawyer and told the lawyer, and this is about halfway through the podcast, and we asked her not to report it. And she was great, she didn't, because we wanted a chance to present it at trial. In court, not at trial, but in court. And also, we didn't know exactly where Asia was going to be. It was going to take her time. She had to get her own lawyer. She had to document it, and we didn't know how long that would take. We certainly didn't want Sarah to put it in the next podcast, and suddenly Urich is on the phone with Asia again and messes it up. So, after the Jay interview, Urich's interview, we filed a amendment to our existing petition. The amendment said, number one, Asia is back in the game. She remembers that day. She's willing to testify in court. She promises to come to court to testify. And then her own allegation that the lead prosecutor, under oath, lied to the court. So, we filed it. The state filed a motion to strike, which basically says to the court, please disregard what these people just filed. But it was a really lame motion. It was like a page and a half. It didn't have any substance. And then we filed a response. And 3 days after the response, the court ruled, and basically in our favor, and said that they would give us another shot. So yes. Now, I can tell you that before the show, this was kind of procedural. We had lost the post-conviction. We had just kind of filed this application to get a new shot, thinking, very few cases get it. Very few cases get the chance to do the whole thing over again, basically what you just did. And it's unheard of for it to happen in a matter of like days, literally, of the last filing. So some people think this is a really good thing. Some people think this could be really bad. It means the court just wants to get it over with. But the hearing is coming very quickly. It's in June. In fact, our first brief is due next month, in March. So the court has set a very, very fast docket, which also is rare, that it's going to move this quickly. If things go well in June, inshallah, Adnan gets a new trial, and that's what we're hoping for. So, I hope everybody makes dua that he does, and we're incredibly grateful for Sarah that she brought this to light. I just want to say, I'm keeping my cell phone with me. A couple weeks ago, I gave a talk at Georgia Tech, and I left my phone in my purse. And during the talk, Adnan called 3 times. And he doesn't get it. I don't get to talk to him every week. So, and when I miss it, I'm like, oh my God, it might be another week or 10 days. But just in case it happens, I might have him say salam. I'm gonna keep this with me. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over now. That's my update. And then I wondered about that with the rest of the audience. But what was amazing and remarkable to me is like people, when she did that episode, because there was one episode about that, people just were like, that's ridiculous. Not just Muslims were angry, non-Muslims were like, what the heck are you talking about? That has nothing to do. So their response was, people rejected it completely out of hand. And people thought, this is egregious, this is ridiculous. And so I was considering the climate of, fear and kind of bigotry against Muslims after 9/11. I was really, really pleasantly surprised. And, alhamdulillah, it's been good. And almost immediately, I was contacted by the South Asian Bar Association, the National Association. That board of this association, they're like, we want to file an amicus brief in this case because this was unconstitutional. This is a board that is almost entirely made up of Hindu and Sikh attorneys. There's not a single Muslim attorney on that board. But they were like, we cannot stand for this. So we discussed the procedural aspects of it. They worked on it for 2 months. I gave them all the trial transcripts. They ended up not doing that just because there's only certain times in a case you can file such a thing. But they did do a really strong op-ed in the Baltimore Sun, which is where I wanted it so the courts could read it and the judges could read it, which, by the way, they are following it. Mm-hmm. They are following it.
You brought up the imagery of Adnan now as a Muslim man in prison and just an older man, and it kind of might fit with what stereotypically Muslim men are supposed to look like. And one of my questions is, do you think that because the audience, because of the medium of it being a podcast and not seeing him as he looks like now, only having the pictures of the teenage Adnan and only hearing his voice that doesn't have an accent, sounds very young, do you think that really played into how the audience perceived the story? Do you think that it would have been taken differently if people actually saw what he looked like now and it was on TV rather than a podcast format?
I wish I could say no, but I think the answer is yes. I definitely think so. And it's not that anybody's withholding his photographs. Like the last photograph I have of him was from a long time ago. And I posted it on my blog. He looks similar. I mean, like the way I described. Maybe I think his beard's gotten bigger, I don't know. And then the last time we visited, and my husband visited, we took pictures, but he's been moved to a maximum security facility 5-6 years ago. And it's much, much harder. It takes forever to get the pictures. Like, just to get them developed, to get them out. I understand that his little brother Yusuf just got some. So when I get them, I might post them. Although Adnan has told me, he's like, I look like crap in the pictures, please don't post my picture. We'll see. I might, though. Once I see the picture, I'll decide. But I do think it's even with the Chapel Hill shooting, the optics of, if that was an older immigrant husband and wife, and like an auntie who just happened to be visiting, that's just who we are, right? But this is a beautiful, beautiful young couple, right? And beautiful people, and we respond like that. And I think part of it is that Adnan, when you look at his pictures in his youth, he's a good-looking guy. He sounds like a funny, nice guy. So I do think if it was on TV, it might be different, but I don't know. I don't know. I think people might be less willing to support him in terms of like the fundraising and all these things. But maybe I'm just being cynical. Maybe people are not that awful. I don't know.
So on the topic of community, we know that initially the Muslim community came out in force for Adnan at his initial hearings, but that kind of, after he was convicted, after the verdict was reached, they kind of petered off and they weren't as involved anymore. If you could list 3 things that Adnan's case and Cyril have taught us, the Muslim community, about ourselves, what would they be?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think the first thing might be, and this was a lesson that the community learned in 15 years ago, was that maybe we don't know our kids as well as we think we do. And how difficult it is to sometimes juggle multiple identities or mixed identities in this country, and what that might look like, to somebody who's on the outside, which I thought was really astonishing. Even someone like Sarah, but so many people have, the prosecution argued this, right? That he led this double life, like he's like this nefarious, and I got hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from people saying, oh my God, that's exactly how I was as a teenager, as a Muslim kid or as an Indian kid in this country, whatever. And I think that, so I think, that maybe raises a question about ourselves. And, I have a teenage daughter, and, it's forced me to think, like, about how open. But then, as a Muslim, I'm like, we still value things like haya. We value things like certain relationships. We, keeping modesty between elders and and honoring your elders by not putting everything you're doing in their face, right? But I think it has opened up questions about what it means to be a Muslim growing up in the United States. The second thing might be that, and I don't know if we're there anymore. I feel like after 9/11, like we have learned to organize and fight for ourselves in a way that we didn't know how to do before. And I also want to say, at the time, look, I was in law school, so I was pretty young. I was like 21, 22, 20, yeah, I think I was 22, I can't remember. But, all of his contemporaries were in high school, so they even didn't have, it was mostly the aunties and uncles. There's always so much they could have done. They paid as much as they could. They put their houses up, to secure his bail, which he wasn't granted. But then at the end, they walked away. And maybe that's one thing that we have to learn, is that if you don't walk away, you might be able to make things happen. And in this case, I think if I hadn't contacted Sarah, that was pretty much the end of the line for us. So, we've fought a lot of battles since 9/11, and we've had a lot of people put away for all kinds of reasons. But what tends to happen is we forget. They get locked away and we just forget them. And you don't have to, and they're still living, and if you don't, it just takes really one or two people to open possibilities for somebody who might be hopeless in that case. Do I really have to give you three things? Okay. And that is how the show started. I was really irritated at that. But I struck back on my blog, so that's the end of that. But it's not the end of that. I'm always going to carry that in a part of my heart. So I think the episode in which Sarah talks about Adnan stealing from the mosque was just ridiculous to me. It was ridiculous to me. I knew why she did it. I knew why she had to do it. She was literally being harassed by two guys who were so adamant. They're like, we have stuff to tell you that's gonna blow the lid off of this, and we're gonna expose Adnan. And in the end, it was that, finally it was that, okay, he stole some money from the masjid when he was in 8th grade.
And they did it too.
And he did it too, and by the way, he's still a good guy. And the fact that she actually had to do that, it was such an unnecessary humiliation. It wasn't like he was 17 when he was arrested, right? Like, he was still a kid. And then you were talking about something he did when he was 13, okay? And, what was the name of Renee? I'm talking to you. What was the name of the Indian store in Sam's Plaza? Patel Brothers?
No,
Sham. Auntie and Uncle Sham, I stole some cassettes from you, like in 1992 or 1993. I'm just going to put it out there.
Which happens to be my brother's best friend's parents' store.
I owe them about $12 probably, plus interest. So I was probably 17 years old. I really wanted those Bollywood cassettes, and I took them. Damn it, I still have them, by the way. So, the idea that is somehow linked to his propensity to kill a girl, to kill somebody, and that every single person she talked to was like, Adnan? No, we could have never believed it was Adnan. Adnan, he's never fought. She couldn't find a single person to say that Adnan had actually had a fight with that person, that he'd ever been violent with somebody, that he was confrontational or aggressive. So, and I know I had been sending, and other people started sending Adnan transcripts. So he was reading this, and it hurt his feelings. It really hurt his feelings, and I think it hurt his sense of dignity. Even somebody in his position has, human beings still have a sense of dignity. And it hurt his sense of dignity, and it also made him really wonder about his relationship with Sarah. And that's been really complicated for all of us anyways. It's like, she's our friend, we need her, she hates us, what's going on? And so, hence that 18-page letter that he wrote to her, I think that was just him being like, what is up with us? Like, are we friends, are we not friends? And they still keep in touch. They still keep in touch. She likes to talk to him. They're like, and I think she's gonna continue until he actually, hopefully, gets out. Because the way she ended is one thing, but I think she thinks he's innocent. He didn't want to admit anything in front of his dad. And there's notes in the interview where he asked the officer, listen, Can we do this interview with my older brother instead? Because that's how we are cordial. I mean, look, at no point were Sarah and I like, even though I thought we were becoming friends, we weren't really becoming friends. I mean, she had a job to do, and I wanted her to do that job. She needed me, I needed her, we all needed each other. We were all using each other in some way. But I do every so often shoot her like, oh my God, did you see Jay's, or did you see, Sarah is not on social media. So a lot of times she doesn't know what's going on Twitter. I mean, I know that others like Dana and others like will tell her, but every so often, we might shoot each other a text, but that's it. I needed the files back. There's audio tapes, there's videotapes of the trial, and she just recently dropped them off at Adnan's parents' house. So, kind of an as needed. We talked about, and this was maybe halfway through the show, taking a vacation at some point together. I don't know if that's actually ever going to happen. If Adnan gets out, we'll go. This was less than one day. We went to lunch, and in 2 hours they convicted. I didn't even get to eat my lunch. Okay? So, I don't know how anybody can sit and say Christina did a good job. If that is considered a good job, we are all screwed. That is not how our legal system should operate.